computer. Okay, I am with Dan. Dan, tell everybody. Yeah, sorry, we were just chatting, and it's always weird to transition into like podcast mode. Tell everybody where you are on your author journey.
So I've been writing for years, but I recently uh, I've been kind of checking off the life stage things in my life, and so I recently, I got a doctorate, and I got to where I want to be in my career. My wife and I, we had a couple kids, and so finally realized, at the end of my 20s, I was like, I could actually start taking this writing thing seriously.
Nice.
And so kind of one day I said, okay, let's do the writing thing. And so I've got kind of a bucket list epic fantasy project that I've been kicking around for the better part of 2 decades. And I decided, no, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna apply myself to it and take a look at it. And so that's where I'm at. I've been consuming creative writing content kind of like Pac-Man for the past 2 years.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
and so that brought me to the Dialogue Doctor, and now I'm here.
Nice. Okay, and we're talking about you got a like in like all great fantasy epics, you got a multiple vehicle plot, and you've got multiple books planned out.
Yeah.
And specifically, though, there's one vehicle who focuses as a villain.
Yes, he would be traditionally considered the villain.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share the document you sent me?
Not at all.
Okay, great. I always want to ask first. I don't want to be like, and here's your work. I'm just kidding. So
I
this is
had a
the
little
dude.
bit too much fun on Midjourney one night.
No, I totally, dude. This is like the beautiful tool and author's bane is us like screwing around on Midjourney and the new Chat GPT visual thing. We're gonna use this too. But okay, so talk to me about this is our boy, Erdogan. And you do want to focus on him, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Because just to for the audience, Jeff and I, we talked a little bit about my sort of uh, project. I've got kind of three viewpoint characters.
Mm-hmm.
One's a male protagonist, one's a female protagonist, and then there's this sort of villainous character. The male and the female protagonists are, they think a lot like me,
Yeah.
and I find myself being very easy. It's very easy for me to slip into their voice,
Yeah.
but because this guy is so different from me, that's really why I needed help with him.
Yeah.
Because I I waffle over how he would think, whereas my other two vehicles is like, I know them.
Yeah.
I know them like the back of my hand. Whereas he's the one who's been giving me trouble.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to focus on him.
Okay. Let's start off. Talk to me about his story and his personality. Let's just get into him.
Sure. So he is kind of like an Alexander / Napoleon kind of conqueror figure. Very young, very good at killing people and beating armies. And he is, similar to those characters in the sense that he's been in his culture. He's been sort of primed for this. He's been trained to become a conqueror for his entire life. The way his people works is there's sort of, he's in this people group that kind of, the big golden ring that everybody wants to do is they want to take over the empire where my protagonists live.
Okay.
And that's the one thing that no one's been able to do.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I'm going to be the guy who's going to do it. And so
how does people see that?
They are generally they're generally open to this. There's a lot of the people, well, and it sort of depends on who you talk to, because there's a lot of people who are just like, dude, I'm just goat farming, man. Like,
yeah.
But the it's sort of a warlike society, a little bit like the Mongols,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the sense that they are that conquering is definitely what they're used to. Is that
yeah,
okay? The new warlord's coming in and he's conquered us, and then the next warlord's going to come in and conquer us, and that's kind of what they're used to. And so, kind of they're sort of expecting, one of these days, a conqueror is going to come in and they're going to conquer. They're going to conquer the big prize. Um, the ones who are sort of into that conquering project, they're down with this.
okay,
Um, you know, the average Joe in his people again is herding goats and just wants to feed their family. And there is a certain extent that part of what I'm trying to do here is, you know, peoples don't go to war,
hmm,
people go to war.
yeah,
And so it's the part of what I'm trying to do with this character is that it's that not everybody in sort of the villain land is villainous, and not everybody in hero land is heroic.
yeah,
And I'm definitely dealing with some of those
yeah,
various shades of gray there.
yeah. Fantastic fantasy line, in that like the villains often just have their own perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not pure evil. They just
No, no.
have their own. Yeah. Um, okay, so this is very there's a couple how else would you describe him before I start blabbing on?
He's very as I've been working with him, because I at this point I'm working on the second installment of the series.
Hmm.
And in the first installment, it's very much kind of him doing his thing, and and he's trying to conquer the empire. And at the end of the first installment, through some political shenanigans, he conquers the empire. And so
Okay,
now he's the dog who's caught the car.
gotcha.
And he is sort of, I'm really having to dig into the psychology of what that means, because he got the thing that he wants ostensibly.
Yeah.
And this part is more about him trying to hold on to it and him wrestling with the consequences of what it took to get there.
Okay.
Um, and what I've come down to a lot is he's lonely. Um, he doesn't have any real personal relationships with anybody.
Okay.
He's also, as I was sort of looking in, trying to like figure out, okay, I'm trying to describe this character. Um, I'm not a clinician, and so I'm not trying to diagnose my character. I think that gets thorny. But
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of how I was describing him fits the bill of people who might be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay.
And I went on I went on a deep dive and I was reading material of people with narcissistic personality disorder describing their lives and the way they interact with people. And it's like, this is similar to Erdogan. This is similar to this character that I've created.
Yeah.
Um, at least with the way that he behaves and relates to people, where he's lonely, he's getting adoration and praise from people, but he's also sort of insecure. Um,
Is he insecure at the beginning or is he insecure after he wins?
I think he's insecure the whole time, but he's once he wins, he's forced to. He finally gets a chance to reflect on the insecurity and to stew in it.
Gotcha.
And part of what is um, fueling this insecurity is that he's really good at conquering armies with battle, on the battlefield. And the way he was able to get the empire, the way he was able to get his victory was through political subterfuge.
Yeah.
He played the Game of Thrones, not he didn't conquer a battle. He sort of corruptly weaseled his way into this ossified political system, and so he's a little bit fish out of water.
Okay.
He's not an idiot, but he's not experienced. His skill set is give me a battlefield,
Okay.
but he's he's forced to use a different set of skills, in this empire than what he's used to.
How does that impact his personality?
Um, it's highlighting the it's highlighting the insecurities,
Okay.
because normally he can hide his insecurities over stacking up 10,000 skulls of his enemies. And in
Gotcha.
this case, he's like, oh my gosh, I just got outwitted in that boardroom.
Okay.
Um, so it's the he's he's insecure because um he's not in as strong of a place as he usually is, where he can just
Yeah.
shoot more arrows and cannonballs at his enemy.
Okay. So I'm starting to feel your pain in writing this character.
How so?
Well, the thing about creating a vehicle, a main character that the reader is gonna travel with, is the reader wants to root for that character. The reader needs to, if not like the character, at a minimum appreciate the character, understand the character on a deep level, which means typically that the reader needs to be able to empathize with the character's flaws
Hmm.
and want the character to grow, want the character to become more than they are. So this character, one, we don't like narcissists.
No,
They're tough. Now,
it was
there
very
are,
interesting. I think it was a couple pods ago. You went through like what it was like Forbes lists of what makes people unlikable,
yeah,
and I was like, oh, that's Erdogan.
yeah, that's my character. Yeah, there are likable narcissistic characters. For example, Marvel's Thor.
Yes,
He is a narcissist who is beloved. And
but part of that is he gets to be funny.
yeah, what's missing here in Thor, that like what's missing in Erdogan that's in Thor, is that he's insanely charming.
Mm.
That's and I'm just gonna, I'm not saying make him charming. I'm just throwing this stuff on the whiteboard to be like, hey, here's some directions we could go. A conquering figure who is like battle hardened, lonely and isolated, and compensating for his insecurities by killing people is really hard to relate to. If you make him insanely charming, we have hope,
Mm.
right? You have to give the reader hope that he's good, because what you're doing is, this is the villain, and you're being very clear. He's the villain. He's going to win. And then when he wins, he's going to become worse. So you want this becoming worse to trick the reader. You want him, this is the like game we're going to play with the reader. You want the reader to think, hey, maybe he's growing and changing. And then as he progresses, it's like, no, 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 he's going in the wrong way. But you always have to make them hope that he's going to grow and change. It's a
Okay.
little like, now, in other ways, Loki from the Marvel universe, since we both speak Marvel, Loki from the Marvel universe also falls strongly into this. If you take
Yes.
out this, right? If you
Yes.
take out that he's skilled, this is Loki.
Yes.
Incredibly insecure, compensates for his strengths, especially early in their storytelling. Lonely and isolated. You also have to take out this. Loki has no
Yeah.
support. So, but deeply believes in his destiny, a glorious purpose,
Yes.
right? Again, charming,
Charming.
right? Which makes him likable. For most of the MCU, they've changed it now with the final Loki TV show. They've given
Yes.
him a redemption arc. For most of the storytelling around him, this is what they do. They keep making you think he's going to become less insecure and actually like And what they hold out the whole time is um less selfish, um like what they hold out with Loki is they add this, and with Thor, they add this idea that they are self-absorbed, which is common for narcissists. But that so the change that you kind of dangle with these characters in front of the reader is that at any minute they're going to learn to participate in part of the community, right? Join the gang. That's the like hope. And you put a bunch of characters around them. This is just talking about narcissists in general. You put a bunch of characters around them that also desperately want them to join the gang. And then at each stage, with a heroic character like Thor, they do join the gang. And they learn
Joins
to
the
be less,
Avengers.
yeah, they learn to be less self-absorbed, right? And then like his he loses to Thanos, and then he goes back off into his like isolated, self-absorbed nonsense. He has this like negative character growth arc, but then the last movie is all about him sacrificing of himself to see others' greatness and to promote the greatness of others, right? Like, so we end in his last movie in Love and Thunder with this hero arc that's like he's finally become the loving, less self-absorbed, less selfish character who
Yes,
has a
that movie was a
family.
mess, but at least with the character work of Thor, he's he's a parental figure.
Yeah,
He is taking care
he
of
takes
children.
on,
He
yeah,
is giving away his power,
yeah,
and
he
he's
finally he moves from being the drunk fat slob who then ran around with the other narcissists in Guardians of the Galaxy. He
yes,
stopped being the narcissist with them and stopped battling like Star-Lord, who's also a narcissist in some ways and has
yes,
this same story arc. And he's finally, but Star-Lord has already completed his story arc by the time that Thor gets there.
yeah.
So now, and we finally get the story arc complete with Thor. It's this idea of self-absorption to less selfish part of the gang. And
So
what makes him palatable, what makes all of these characters palatable in this state is that they're so effing charming. And that's
that,
kind of what you're missing with him right now.
yeah, that's a really interesting insight.
Yeah. The other
Um,
way you can go with him, Kana Gluen, I'm just going to throw this out so you can think about it, because Kana Gluen wrote the Genghis Khan novels.
mm,
Did you and I talk about those?
we didn't.
They're fantastic. They're I can't remember what they're called, but he wrote a series of 3 novels that you historical fictionalize the life of Genghis Khan, and you
Oh,
start
that
from,
sounds fascinating.
yeah, oh, it's great. They're great. The first one especially is fantastic. Second one's really good. Third one, the empire gets too big. It's too hard to track the characters. You're like, who are these people? Um,
Like any epic, they start writing sideways.
it starts to kind of like go, you're waiting for Kublai, but the problem is historically Kublai is actually like his grandson who doesn't
Yeah,
appear for a while. So you kind of have this like spreading out of like what's happening. It's really fun when Khan is the underdog, but when Genghis is like just murdering people because and like
yes,
there's no, it's less fun. You're like, this is less fun now. So he tries to do the whole like, let's replace the Khan narrative in the third book. It kind of comes out, it kind of doesn't. Anyway, for Khan, what makes you love him is that he's loyal to his people and that he has a vision for his
mm,
people. Now he's a narcissist and he is at the top of that vision, but he's not charming. He's terrifying. But he has a vision for an oppressed people group and he is insanely loyal. He will do anything for his men. And that is what makes you like this character who is tough. He's a tough character to like. But for him, it's that like when those who go to battle with me, I will die for you. And I have a vision for my people. It's very much a Julius Caesar character. Conagluan also wrote a book, a series of Caesar novels. they're really great novels. They're terrible history. They're like he literally like at some point just like gives up on Roman history altogether, and he's just like,
Sometimes that's just the way to go.
yeah, he's like now he's a pirate, which
Yeah.
he was. He got kidnapped by pirates for a little bit, but he like takes it way too
Well,
far. He's like
and
now we're in a civil war. Like
it
it's
is
just
it is interesting that that is common of those kind of conqueror figures. One of the things that I didn't think that the Ridley Scott Napoleon did very well was explain just how much his men loved him.
yeah. I didn't see it, but my teenagers came back. One of my teenagers, especially, is a big history buff, and he came back and he was like, I mean, this is more like a romance story than an actual like story about
I
who
didn't dislike
Napoleon
the
was.
film,
Yeah, that's he was
but
like, it's just not. Yeah,
the emphasis, or I don't feel like they really quite captured, how can a guy come back from exile and then all of his guys are just like, yep, let's go to Waterloo.
yeah,
Like that kind of cult of personality. And it seems like with Genghis and with Caesar and with Napoleon and with Alexander, a lot of that, a lot of why they weren't, they were hated by a lot of people, but not their guys.
yeah.
Uh,
And it's the Godfather motif, right?
yeah,
Like this is Michael Corleone, super intelligent, lonely and isolated, pretty self-absorbed, believes in his destiny. Now that we're talking Michael Corleone after he's accepted his role.
yeah, Godfather Part Two.
Yeah, conqueror figure, insecure, compensates with strength, right? Like he's when he's nervous about what's going to happen, yeah, everybody dies. Very successful in his version of battles. He's supported by insiders, and the reason he's supported by insiders is he has a vision for the family, and no one ever steps against the family, right? Like this is the Godfather 2 Corleone, and it's that like so. My question for you is like you have to give the reader something about this character to hope for, right?
And I think I've already subconsciously seeded that.
Okay, which way are we going?
So the one of the things I did in terms of cast is there's his supporting cast is he's got a
Yeah,
couple characters who basically say, encourage him, kill more people,
yeah,
become more obsessed, become more isolated,
okay.
um, get worse. And there's a couple people who are essentially saying like, maybe you could not be terrible. Maybe you could. They're encouraging him more to be to be at least not.
And that's
How
what's
do I phrase
important
this?
here when we talk about these characters is that when you're writing him, you can't think of him as terrible or not terrible.
Correct.
He's
Correct.
so if you're going with the loyalty version of him, then the two things that are in contradiction are lonely and isolated versus loyal,
Mm,
and self-absorbed and selfish versus vision for his people. And this is that's the contradiction.
mm.
Does that make sense? If you're
Yeah.
going for the charming version of him, then the difference is we're going to pull up the charming and it's less selfish. And so these are the traits the reader wants you to lean into. So then it's self absorbed versus charming, right? Thor's at his worst when he's just being an ass.
Yeah.
And then it's the conquering, believes in his own destiny versus less selfish.
Now, question is, and I think what I've been because I'm not really writing him as charming. I'm not really writing him as
Okay.
vision for his people. I think what I'm writing him as is pathetic, and I'm kind of writing him like the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, or like Ray Fiennes from Schindler's List, where you realize that this guy is, Joaquin Phoenix Joker is not charming. He's nothing, and yet you just kind of feel bad for him.
Okay. So
Can
then
that work?
it can, but you have to lose these. You have to lose supported, believes that in his destiny and supported by insiders.
Mm,
He can still believe his destiny, but the thing about the Ralph Fiennes character and about the Joker character is everybody thinks they're jokes
Hmm.
until they and there's a drive here for those characters of vengeance.
Hmm.
Those characters are and the people that they gather, so there's a drive for vengeance for those characters, and then the people that they gather, there's loyalty, but the loyalty isn't about a vision for their people, it's about rallying the outsiders. That's I haven't seen
Yes.
the Joker movie, but that is always the Joker cry is the world hates us, but we can come together. We don't have to listen to what the world's or the classic Heath
Yes.
Ledger
The
quote.
yes, the
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix Joker is he's just this horrible, pathetic person.
Yeah.
And he sort of accidentally stumbles into becoming a symbol.
Yeah. And what
And
they
at the end, he's like, "Oh, I now have followers. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Now I'm important."
Yeah. And what they do with this character, the way that you give the reader hope with this character is you say, um, uh, he's never going to lose his patheticness, but he's going to gain self acceptance, right? He's going to gain, not self acceptance, self understanding,
Yes. I
right?
feel like this is more the path that I have been writing the character on.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to really rethinking the way that I'm doing things, but I feel like that this has kind of been the vibe that I've been going. That
Okay.
this is the way that I've been writing it.
Okay.
And rather than completely, re-envisioning the character as somebody who's, doubling down on the loyalty or doubling down on the charming, the
Yeah.
that I could double down on what I'm already doing and do it more on purpose.
Yeah.
Now he is supported by insiders, but I think one of the ways that he could not be supported by insiders is that he's being used by insiders.
Yeah. You need him persecuted for being weird.
Yes.
He can be this is Nate from Ted Lasso.
I've only seen a couple episodes.
Okay, I'm gonna spoil. Are you okay if I spoil it for you?
Yeah, go for it.
Nate from Ted Lasso is very self-absorbed. He's very at the start. He's very lonely and isolated. He is incredibly smart, and you find out that he believes he should be the head coach of a major team. As the show goes on in season 1, he's insecure and he starts to compensate by being an asshole to everybody. He has a lot of success up front in his coaching, and there's definitely a vengeance mentality. Now, just to kind of um mark this up as like what the reader's like, let's say yellow is just who he is, and red is what the reader really wants to change about him. And he's also persecuted for being weird. What the reader wants to change about Nate is the reader wants Nate um, to become comfortable in his own skin and to let go of the vengeance because he's winning. He's got a great thing going. I can't spell all of a sudden.
Vengeance is one of those words, man.
Oh, dude, I'm never going to spell it right. Okay, so he's got this great thing going. This is where you want him to grow to all the time. And the funny thing about Ted Lasso is there are no anchors. Everybody's an engine. Everybody's super encouraging to everybody all the time. Um, Ted is encouraging him this direction. Is like, hey, you're great. They start calling him Nate the Great. You're Nate the Great, even though he's like the towel boy. Like you're Nate the Great, and they're like, hey, let's let go of the vengeance and let's just let's do what's right. Let go of the vengeance and join the heroes. That's the desire for this character, is like, you have all of these great skills. Let's use them as a force for good. That's a better way to say it. Be a force for good. And that's
So
what the audience really wants for him. Now, Nate goes the other way. He actually
yeah.
leans in, but you get this big hope arc, and that you're hoping that Nate becomes this, and instead Nate doubles down on all the things you don't want him to do. And that's
So
it's tragic. It's
one of
painful.
the things that I was trying to understand with Vea
Yeah.
is how Vea works with tragedy,
Hmm.
whether the engines and the anchors, because I know who my engines and my anchors are, as long as I understand my orientation. Um, the audience wants this person to be a good person, right?
Yeah.
Their vehicle to be a good person.
Yeah. So
Um,
this is in this, if we're going with this direction, this is what the audience wants. They want him
okay.
to become comfortable with who he is. They want him to let go of his vengeance, and they want him to become a force for good from his people's perspective. Force for good for his people. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they want.
For his people. Okay, that's a good way of thinking.
For his people, because we're in his perspective.
Right.
Force for good for his people. That
And
may mean,
that may be still opposed to my other engines,
yeah,
but
still opposed to your other engines, but it might be like, maybe we can find peace, maybe we can stop the wars.
I'll give you a good comp. Um, Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
When Joffrey is king and Tywin shows up,
Yep.
Tywin is sitting there saying, "How do I help this snot-nosed kid figure out how to be a competent leader?"
Yeah.
And that so Tywin's still a villain.
Yep.
From the audience's point of view, Tywin's a terrible person, but Tywin would be an engine for Joffrey
Yep.
because he's trying to make
He's trying to
Joffrey
get,
into
so
the
yeah.
best version of Joffrey.
Yep. Any character that's trying to get him to go in this direction is an engine.
Okay, so now I know who my engines and my anchors are.
Yeah. And now that doesn't, so for example, Ted for Nate is an engine. Ted is trying to get Nate to be this person. But where you're headed is um increased compensation for insecurity, um and total vengeance. Here's that word again. um but like, that's where you're going. If we're talking about what's going to change, we're going toward, this is the tragedy aspect of it, is that this is what the reader doesn't want.
And
We're
that's where
go-
he's headed.
yeah, and he's going to head here. So from your readers' perspectives, anchors are people that encourage this.
Okay.
So going back to the Ted Lasso example, the former owner who's trying to, destroy the team that he no longer owns, he hires Nate as his head coach
And so
for
he's going to encourage all the things that the audience doesn't want for
for
Nate.
total vengeance reasons. Let's destroy this team together. In the like Joffrey thing, man, it's been forever since I read those books. In the Joffrey thing, you have people around him that are encouraging his insanity.
Yes.
Because for him, and I can't remember what characters do it. I want to
His
say
mom.
his
His
mom,
mom.
yeah, and I want to say Littlefinger does it a little bit,
Yes.
and it's that like, they want to see, for him, it's not about vengeance. For him, it's about kind of megalomania.
Yeah.
And they want to see, they push him to become more of a megalomaniac. So it's
Yes.
that like, they encourage all of the terrible things that he wants to do. They're his anchors from the perspective of the reader.
Yeah. Okay. And what's good, I think, is that I kind of have in the supporting cast, I have examples of both
Great.
the engines and the anchors.
Great.
And almost literally, I have a Tywin character.
Nice.
That is it's his chief of staff.
Okay.
She is also his aunt,
Okay.
and she's about 70, and so she's been doing this since before he was born.
Nice.
Um, that she's basically the person who runs the place while the conqueror is out conquering.
Yeah, yeah,
And she is like, hey, stop killing people. Start like sitting there and like, you know, passing legislative accomplishments and like,
yeah,
can you govern? Like, let's govern. And
yeah,
she's definitely the engine in the sense that she wants to be the best version of him for his people.
yeah,
Let us let's negotiate peace deals, and let's make sure that people pay their taxes,
yeah,
and that's what she's, and don't screw around, because one of his issues is that all of his anchors want him to get more involved with magic, and she's like, quit it with the magic.
yeah.
Let's not do magic. So she's definitely then his main engine.
And there is a thing in this character version where part of what we're hoping for and part of what the engines are pushing for. I said comfortable in his own skin earlier, but part of what you're describing is like, hey, accept that you're weird. Accept that people aren't going to like you. Accept who you are, accept your shortcomings, learn to embrace them. The engines are always pushing in that direction, right? Like they're always like, and so a great engine for this character, like you're describing as his aunt, is somebody who loves him for exactly who he is. That's the engine. You don't need to
Interesting.
be something else. You don't need to do these things. And a lot of times it is their transformation is represented by their exterior mask. Because if we're talking interior or exterior, right, like lonely and isolated is an interior thing. We're going to see that through conversations, how he interacts with people. Self-absorbed is an exterior thing. He's going to display that exteriorly. Believes in his destiny is interior. Conquering figure is exterior. Persecuted for being weird and how he feels about that is kind of in between. Being skilled is exterior, right? Like these are successful in battle is exterior. So you have this character that's kind of divided,
Yes.
right? And then the byproduct of that division is vengeance. The insecurity is part of that, like strength. So there's an exterior and an interior, if you want to think of it this way. And the choice for him is between like vengeance and anger versus like a deeper understanding of society and appreciation of people's failures. So often the anchors of these characters um end up having a like wisdom to them, like Tyrion Lannister, where there's an aged wisdom. Now we don't like the problem with Tyrion Lannister as an example is we don't like Tyrion Lannister. He's the
Yes.
worst. But he has an aged stately wisdom where he's like, look, I know what I'm doing,
Yes.
right? Then that's why Ted Lasso and Nate work as this like pair, because Ted Lasso has this folksy
Yes.
beloved wisdom of like, I know what we need to do here. I know who we
So
need to become. Yeah.
the the aunt, she's not quite as evil as Tywin. Um, she'll she actually gets. I'm giving her the redemption that the audience wants Erdogan to get.
Yeah.
That because she fails at eventually at the end of the series, she fails at getting him to reform and what ends up happening is that she kind of has to pick up the pieces, but
Yeah.
she gets the hero moment at the end, and
Nice.
so the audience can root for her,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though she's still prickly and somewhat villainous. Um,
And
there's
they don't
another.
they
Oh,
don't just need to root for her, they need to root for her vision of him,
yes, yes,
right? Because he's the vehicle. You got to root for her vision of him, if that makes sense.
yes, and they and I think they will. How I'm writing her. Um, he's got another engine who is she is a servant that he sort of commandeers. Um, she's the princess's handmaiden. He
Okay.
ends up getting married to through some sham political marriage, and he sort of steals the princess's right hand woman and makes her his right hand woman, kind of to screw with the princess. But she's actually a nice person who she hates him because he's a monster, but she kind of is the only person who treats him like a human being.
Yeah, that's a perfect
She
example.
gives that unconditional,
Yeah.
not love because she doesn't love him, but she gives him a human connection. She treats him as she's the only person who treats him as a human being,
Yeah.
and that she ends up being an engine that she and the ant both are his engines in the senses that they're like, here, you can accept yourself for being weird. You can be the best version of yourself for your people. You don't have to stack up the skulls of your enemies. And those two engines together, I think will accomplish kind of what I think what you were sort of describing is what we want the audience will want that engine to do. I think those two characters can between the two of them they can accomplish it.
Yeah, and the thing that those engines, to make it a compelling story, you're gonna need moments in the story where he really does lean into them.
Yeah.
And then typically the way these stories go is he leans into the engines. It looks like he could possibly actually have victory. Like they don't do this with Joffrey in Game of Thrones.
No.
Joffrey is just like a downward spiral. But you lean into them, you think they could possibly turn and have a moment of redemption where they become a force for good in the story for their people. Um, Something happens that triggers their like vengeance button and they lash out against the engine, and the engine's always like, I don't understand. And the character is always like, I know you don't understand, but this is who I am. And that it's the lashing out against the engine that makes it a tragedy.
And I have in my outline,
Yeah,
I have those points
perfect. Yeah,
of where he has the opportunity to go with the engine, and instead of going with the engine, he lashes out against the engine and he further isolates
yeah,
further, and he just goes full anchor. It's
yeah,
it's Frodo and Gollum telling Sam to get lost.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of times with Frodo and Gollum, they don't do this, but with Nate, they do it. I'm trying to think if Joffrey does it. I think he does. I think he starts wearing the crown, but I can't fully
Oh
remember.
yes.
Often there's an exterior example of the vengeance side.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're going to be vengeance oriented, there's something physically, or the mask is what takes over. So for Nate in Ted Lasso, he's about to be an a-hole when he fixes his posture.
Mm-hmm.
When he sits up straight, it means I am putting on the mask and I am going to be an a-hole. And then when he goes full a-hole, he starts wearing a suit. And there's an interesting, like toward the end of his potential, before he goes full villain, there's some fascinating scenes where he's standing with the rest of the coaching staff. They are all in tracksuits and he's in a suit. And you can just physically see him separating himself from them. Um, I would imagine. I haven't seen the Joker movie. I'd imagine they use his makeup that way. That
Yes.
would that would be my bet. Is that the applying of clown makeup is his leaning into the worst version of himself.
Yes. Toward the
Yeah,
in Act 3 when he gets the red suit and he dances down the stairs or whatever, and he goes full Joker. It's we've reached the point where um his opportunity for sort of being the best version of himself, for accepting himself for being weird, for being a force for good for his people, comfortable in his own skin.
yeah,
We realize not going to happen, and we get the clown makeup and we get the outfit.
yeah. So there's two types of anchors here traditionally in these characters. There's the anchor that delights in the vengeance, and then there's the anchor that triggers the vengeance.
Mm.
And they're two different. So the anchor that delights in the vengeance is an ally.
Is it what?
An ally.
Yes.
And is somebody who's like, I like, yeah, this feels great. Let's do more of this. And then there's the anchor who is to this character, to Erdogan, an antagonist who usually is the one that picks on him, usually is the one that like points out his insecurities and flaws. That character is needed because they always trigger the vengeance.
Mm.
So you got to have both types of anchors.
And I think I'm just looking through sort of who I've already my go-to is always who do I already have?
Mm-hmm.
Right before I put, try to think of a new character or a new thing, I always try to figure, hey, can I reappropriate some, a character that I've already got in the bullpen?
Mm-hmm.
Of his angers or of his anchors, I have a few that are like, yes, more
Yeah,
isolation, more killing people. Like this is awesome.
yeah.
So he's definitely got that.
And those
Um,
are usually going to be like his band of men.
yes.
Yeah,
He's got in this, he's got a couple sort of not quite Iago type figures, but they're
yeah,
very much like, yeah, um get more involved into the bad stuff. Um,
yeah. And just to say, to really make it work, you need an honest supporter. You need somebody who's not tricking him.
oh, okay.
You need somebody who believes in this, who's like, you and me, we're going to burn the world down. Like that's, you need somebody that's like, I am your
And I
right
already know who it's
hand
going to be.
for murdering all of these people. And they deserve it. And they suck. Like it's the person that, with the engines and anchors, you always try to put a character that they are going to grow into. So your aunt, if he becomes the best version of himself, he's going to become to look and behave more like the aunt. You need that for his anchor. If he's going to become the
Okay.
worst version of himself, he's going to lean into this person
Okay.
and be this like
So
bloodthirsty crazy person.
I have sort of two anchors that I was trying to think about. How do I differentiate between the two? They come in different parts of the story and they play some of the same role. And I was thinking, are these guys redundant? But not if I make one of them the trickster and one of them the honest one.
Yeah. And they
One's anchoring him because he's tricking him, but the other one can be completely bought in.
Yeah, and the trickster can be that character that triggers. In the end, the big trigger can be the
Yeah.
trickster, learning that he's been betrayed by the trickster. The A lot of times this anchor has a chorus of persecution,
Mm.
meaning that you don't necessarily need one, because we talked about like you need people encouraging his drive here. So an anchor can be encouraging his drive to trick him. You definitely need the honest, genuine supporter who's like, no, let's do it. Especially if this is the direction you're going to go, because a lot of times we can feel the direction something that's going to go just by the sheer number of engines and anchors. It's if you only have one engine and you have 5 anchors, it's much harder to go the positive route because you have so much to reject. If you've got 5 engines, like what's interesting about the Ted Lasso show, since we keep using it as an example, is there's so many engines, it's almost really hard for characters to fail
Yeah.
because there's so it, and that's what gives
Well,
the show this like
and
super positive vibe.
that's the tone of the show.
Yeah,
The whole
that's what
point is
gives it the
like,
show, is that they're all like making
what if
each other
people were
better.
nice?
Yeah, they're all making each other better all the time, right? Like even the weird characters like Beard are like, I'm making everybody better. Like it's that, so it gives it this like super positive vibe. If you've got all anchors and like one engine and you're having your vehicle climb out of the anchors to the engine, it becomes this really kind of dark but victorious show. A true like tragedy, like the classic tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, they have all these engines and they reject all of them.
Yes.
And
Or
the
they get
engine,
lost in the mail.
Yeah, the engine. Yeah, seriously, the engines in that is the like we want you to slow down and think about the consequences of this stupid relationship, and they're like, one of them dies screaming a curse on both of you. Like it's that kind of like, so that creates a true tragedy. This is more what I would call a predictable tragedy. People are really hoping for the positive result, but you kind of know this
This
is
is
going to
always going to
go
be the way it
bad.
goes.
Yeah, it's inevitable. And so here you can take the trigger anchor and you can make them members of the royal court or members of
Yeah.
society. And so that way you don't have to define a single one. You can just pop them out. He can just have an experience with someone who represents that group of people.
So it's kind of like a collective anchor.
It's a collective anchor. Yeah, it's like the Greek chorus. You got like 10
Yeah.
people on stage. Every once in a while, one of them is going to step out of that chorus and talk and then fade back into the chorus. And that, yeah. And they usually speak with one voice. They're all the same character. Does that make sense? Like, if you're going to use the court example, they're all kind of noble, entitled, rich a-holes.
Yes.
And you can
Yes.
just look at him, you'd be like that's the common fantasy trope, like,
Yes.
the noble, entitled, rich a-hole who's never actually gotten their hands dirty on the
I've got
battlefield.
plenty of those.
Yeah, all you need is to like realize like, okay, whenever I need him to be triggered to go one way or the other, I just have to bring one of them out. And
Yep.
they tend to bring the worst version of him out. And that's like, yeah, it goes that. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
Pause.
What else? Yeah, go for it.
Can I use the restroom?
Yeah, let me pause. I'll pause the recording. Maybe. I'll pause the recording. I speak with so much technical skill. Okay, as you're in the bathroom, I thought of another example of this character that I think lines up better with what you're describing. Did you watch Vikings?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Or I watched the first season.
So after the first season, it gets a little lame. By the time you get to season 4, I think it is, the main protagonist or the main vehicle that the story's been following dies.
Yeah, I'm
And
aware that he bites it.
yeah, and the story becomes about his sons. And one of his sons is Ivar the Boneless. And he doesn't have any legs, but he is wild and bloodthirsty. And the way he proves his worth, there's some great scenes where he's in a raging battle, crawling in the mud on his stomach, hacking people with an axe at their legs. It's fantastic. So you have the brothers, I think there's, and I'm doing this by memory, but I think there's 5 of them or 4 of them. 2 of his brothers are this, like, one of his brothers is specifically the wise counsel, who's like, hey, we can do this differently. One of his brothers is like, I'm going to support Ivar because he's a little dangerous and very smart and successful. But the first chance I get to kill this kid, I'm doing it. And then one of them is an honest supporter and actually believes that Ivar should be himself. And then you also have one that's kind of you have one brother that's kind of a love interest in this. The honest supporter may be a different character, not a brother, but you have one brother that's like a kind of the love interest, but not really, like, not a love interest, but like
Yeah, I was gonna say
Ivar.
that's a little bit more Game of Thrones.
No, it's not that kind of love interest. It's more like hey, we should be a family.
Got
Let's
it.
be a family. They kill this one. Ivar and this one go to war. Ivar's betrayed by this one. Ivar has his honest supporters. And then the chorus of persecution are all of the like old school Vikings who are, you know, how are you going to fight? You don't even have legs
Yeah.
type guys, or you're wild and crazy and an abomination. put on the earth by God to show us how much he hates us, right? Like it's that kind of like you are horrible. So there's that's just another example of this kind of like insecure, highly skilled, lonely and isolated, self-absorbed, conquering figure who's persecuted for being different and persecuted for being weird. And he has that. He definitely has a villain arc. He doesn't have but you keep wanting him because we love the story of the persecuted weirdo who becomes the leader. We
Yes.
love that story. We want him to become that. And he keeps showing signs of it. And then he's cutting people's heads off, right? Like it's that
Yes.
kind of, then he's like going to vengeance. And there is a, like, to keep that character going for seasons upon seasons, there is well, he didn't have any choice but to cut their heads off.
Right.
They forced him into it. There wasn't
You know,
another option. Yeah.
you the way that one of the ways that they made you root for Tony Soprano for as long as we did is because he was in therapy.
Yeah.
And so we thought maybe one of these episodes he's going to listen to his
He's going to
therapist and get
change. And
better.
you're really rooting for the therapist. You're like,
And then you
hey,
realize, wait, it's season 6. This isn't going to
yeah,
happen.
it's not, but every season they give you a little sign. They give you a little hope that
Maybe
it
he's
might
going
be
to treat
better.
his family better.
Yeah.
Maybe he's going to, but yeah. And you keep presenting you keep presenting this character with an opportunity to be good.
Yeah. And he shows willingness, but the world won't let him. Right? Like
Yeah.
it's and that's
Or his own hubris won't let him.
or his own hubris won't let him, like who he is, his position won't allow him to change. And it is the Godfather 3 every time I get out. They
They pull me
pull me
back
back
in,
in. It's like, are
which
they
is
actually
that's
yeah,
the only good quote of the whole
the only
movie.
good quote of the whole movie. Are they pulling you back in though? Are they? I don't think they are, but you seem to think they are. Like
Yeah.
it's that like, it's yeah, it's all about perception. But yeah. Okay, what else can we talk about to help? Do you feel strong
So
and
I feel good about this. I feel like I'm understanding a lot more. Like as I was in the bathroom, I texted my brother, who's one of my alpha readers, and I was like, "This was everything I was hoping it was going to be." um, the okay, just a conception thing.
yeah,
So you mentioned how Ted is an engine.
yeah.
Ted's a vehicle, but
Ted's a
Ted's an
vehicle.
engine for other characters.
Yeah,
So when I'm braiding,
yeah,
um, what do is it sort of when I am in Erdogan's vehicle, my other vehicles are going to be fall somewhere along Vea for
yeah.
him. And it's sort of whether a character is a vehicle or an engine or an anchor or a hazard depends on whose vehicle I'm, right?
Yeah, let me show you. We actually did this as a community earlier this year for Guardians of the Galaxy. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Because it's just a good illustration to show you like how to think about it. Um, yeah, there we go. So you've got your vehicles across the top here. Star Lord, Rocket, Groot, Gamora, and Drax. And what we found out as we talked about it is that Groot actually isn't a vehicle. You're never
No,
actually in
he's not.
Groot's perspective. Um, he's just a like side character. We do get what is happening there? We do get Drax's perspective. We get Gamora's perspective. We get Rockets and we get Star Lords. This is the first Guardians of the Galaxy we were talking about. All of them have their own point of views and perspective. Groot is just a character that like rotates around them. So we can find like who when you think about Star-Lord, it's like who are his engines? Who make him the best version of himself? He is um charming and has this unearned confidence that's very like uh engaging. He's very courageous. He's also selfish and a loner. right? So we want him to move away from being selfish and a loner. We want him to be the community leader that we know he can be. Rocket and him fight all the time, but he always comes out better. Their fighting makes him better.
Yes.
He wants to be better for Gamora. So Gamora is his engine. And then Ronan terrifies him. So he's willing to stand up to Ronan. When Yondu comes around, Yondu is his anchor. Yondu makes him want to run away and be isolated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rocket is very similar in that he is snarky, arrogant, and isolated. And he is the one who pulls him, the ones who pull him into the community are Groot is constantly pulling him into the community, and Peter is constantly pulling him into the community. Whenever he talks to Drax, he becomes the worst version of himself.
Yes.
Right?
He's fighting with Drax while he's drunk at the bar.
Always fighting with Drax. Every time Drax speaks, there's several group conversations in the script, and whenever they have a group conversation, when Drax talks, Rocket's immediate response is the worst version of Rocket.
Yes.
So interestingly, Gamora is also a vehicle. Rocket and Drax are her anchors. Rocket drives her crazy. Peter and Ronan are her engines. They inspire her to be the best version of herself. So you get like Peter and Gamora are mutual engines. Drax is almost everyone's anchor. And then he makes the team all of the where whenever he shows up, all of the team revert to the worst versions of themselves.
Yeah.
And he's almost everyone's anchor. And then
Which is so beautiful about how in part three he's the opposite. He's an engine.
kind of he is, but only kind of. He's still, they change his character enough that he starts to like, and that's the thing over a long scale plot, as these characters develop, their relationships with each other change. So like Star-Lord and Rocket are always engines. When you get to part 3, Gamora is actually Star-Lord's anchor.
Yes.
Right? Because she's changed. So when she changes, their relationship and how they encourage each other to grow, and to grow, he actually needs to let go of her and like release her from his group if he's actually going to grow and succeed. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
totally.
they make Rocket in part 3 everybody's engine, and the way they do it is they cripple him and they put him in a bed.
Yep.
And he's not there, but it's that dramatic change. He's not there to be the snarky a-hole that he always is. So now he's everybody's engine, right? Like it's
Yeah.
that, yeah. The reason the first movie hits so hard emotionally is because Groot is everyone's engine. Everyone is improved by Groot, even Drax. Groot is even Drax engine, and then we kill him.
Yep.
And when you kill him as he's making everyone the best version of themselves.
We are Groot.
Yeah, we are Groot. And now everybody's the best version of themselves, but we're all sad because we killed the character. We love his character because he's everybody's engine. That's
Yeah.
why we love it. And so, because we don't love him because he says, I am Groot all the time. That's weird. We love him because when he says, I am Groot, Rocket has this change.
Yes.
Right? When he says, I am Groot, Star-Lord has this change. Like Peter has this change. So you like, does that make sense? So that's how like in a complex cast, you could do this for Game of Thrones too.
Yeah.
The hard thing about because we were talking about Game of Thrones, the hard thing about Game of Thrones is so many of the vehicles don't actually interact with each other.
Correct.
Like you put Jon Snow on the wall, and
And
Jon Snow's on the
he's out of the
wall.
picture.
Yeah, you put Dany Targaryen in another continent, right? Like
Yes.
she's right, like
So
yeah,
the where I'm at in my story, my male vehicle or my male protagonist, he is on a pirate ship, killing time.
yeah.
And he has a completely different thing.
He's got his own
And
story.
he's Luke on Dagobah training with Yoda.
Yeah.
And he'll come back later. Right now, I've got a lot of time between my female main protagonist and my villain character. So Erdogan and his wife Honora. Um, So she's her own vehicle, but haven't quite figured out
Yeah,
whether or
how does
not
she
she.
impact him?
I
Does she
don't really know.
is she calling him to be the best version of himself, or is she calling him to be the worst version of himself?
And I think that's something that I have to decide.
If
Right.
she's a hero, she has to be an engine. We will not tolerate our heroes, or she can be an unintentional anchor in that, like, she triggers him, but she needs to be a force for good. So
So
if
she
she's a
is
hero, she has to be calling him to be the best version of
just in
himself.
the structure of the story. She is sort of secretly running the rebellion from her bedroom because she's a telepath.
Okay.
So she is on Zoom calls all day with the generals who
Yeah.
are running the rebellion. Um, and she's kind of like in under house arrest. Um, so I could see her as, I mean, she is opposed to Erdogan, but she definitely doesn't want him to become more,
Well,
authoritarian and evil and kill more
she's
people.
opposed to him plot wise.
She's opposed to him plot wise,
How
and
does she feel about him as a person?
she hates him. She
Okay,
hates him.
well then she's an anchor.
Okay,
Yeah, and it'll be a tough relationship. Her hate She becomes a very complicated gray character because as an anchor, when he starts to change for the better, she's gonna have to reject him and be like, no, this is a game. There's no hope for you. And that's going to make the reader not like her.
and I'm okay
So,
with letting the reader not like her sometimes.
yeah, that's the thing, is that characters are good characters are complex. We can like her for other reasons and then not like this side of her, but her actively being an anchor to him has to be part of her character growth. We want that. So usually that kind of character is very a lot of ones on the Enneagram. They believe they know what's right and wrong.
She's a one.
Yeah, lots of ones on the Enneagram. They believe they know what's right and wrong, and there's not a lot of mercy or forgiveness. And we
Yeah.
always want the one to grow in mercy and forgiveness. We always want them to see, hey, things can be gray,
Yes.
and ones
And
never can.
and that's very her. That's very much where how I'm writing her. Well, and part of
Yeah.
it, I'm a one.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I've got a male one and a female one are my male and female protagonists.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're easy to write,
Yeah.
because it's all me with me trying to think, no, I know what the best thing to do, and them having to learn gray.
Yeah. He's likely a 5, by the way.
Really, not a three?
No.
Interesting.
Threes tend to find, even when threes are weird and isolated, they tend to find ways to be successful in groups of people. So if
Mm,
threes find their group, their tribe, and they work to achieve in that tribe and succeed in that
interesting.
tribe.
I'll have
He's
to do more
not
research in the five.
fives. I love fives. One of my sons is a 5. When my kids become like start hitting puberty, we start talking to them about who they are, and the Enneagram becomes a great tool for them to think through who they are. But so one of my sons strongly identifies with a 5. He's fives thrive in mastery. They don't like to feel incompetent.
Mm,
They hate feeling like they don't know what to do.
mm,
They and they really dislike um not understanding something. So there's a fives can be very bristly, especially unhealthy ones, because they'll just deny they don't know things. And they can be very, especially unhealthy fives can be very opinionated and like, no, this is right. This is the way it is, and they don't have a problem rejecting others.
mm.
So they are they're part of there's the ego triad, which is eh, I'm sorry, the anger triad, which is eight, nines, and ones. When pushed to their worst, their natural response is anger. And then there's the ego triad, which is two, threes, and fours. When pushed, they lean into like pride and arrogance. There's the fear triad. Five is part of the
Five,
fear
six, and
triad.
seven.
Five, six, and seven. Sixes lean into community. That's why they're called loyalists. So they gather around the people they trust and they reject everybody else.
You're a six, right?
I'm a hardcore six.
My
Sevens,
older brother's a six, and it's
yeah.
I was like, you say, oh, sixes are afraid of everything. I'm like, yeah, that's my older brother.
Sixes are afraid of everything. Yeah, I'm what they call there's three types to each type. This is too deep into the Enneagram. There's three types to each type. Everybody can stop. Anybody listening to this can stop listening now. And I'm the counter type six, which is what they call the sexual type. It doesn't have anything to do with sex or physicality. It's about risk.
Mm,
So I'm the type of six that if something scares me, I have to touch it.
mm,
I can't not touch it. I have to touch it. If I'm afraid of something, like if there's something that makes me nervous or worried, I have to engage in it. But sixes and fives are a little different since you know a six. If a six, if you're part of a six tribe, they're your greatest supporter and friend. They will literally die for you. If you betray a six, you are dead to them. And they will have no problem cutting you off forever. They will no problem. Just disowning you and never speaking. They won't give it a second thought because you're unsafe.
mm.
For a five's fear is about not is about being seen to be incompetent. So they have the same kind of reaction to ideals, knowledge, and skills. If they're scared of something and they feel like they're going to be seen as incompetent there, that thing doesn't exist. They don't care about it. They don't want anything to do with it because they're incompetent at it. If they, especially if they're scared of it, but if they feel like, if they can master something, they will be the greatest in it at all times. So what you're talking about with a five with him is he's mastered battle. This is what he does, and he does it better than everybody else. He's going to become real uncomfortable when it comes to things of the heart. And he's going to want to just turn it off and run away from it and be completely weird because he's scared of it and it makes him really, really nervous. When it comes to like political manipulation or governing that his aunt wants him to do, let go of the vengeance and let's govern. He's going to be tempted to go to the worst version of himself because it's terrifying because he doesn't know how to do that because he's incompetent in that. And that's why when he gets scared, when he gets uncomfortable, when he gets mocked, when he gets rejected, he's going to grab an axe
Yeah,
because it's where
I
he feels the
I
most confident.
just finished writing a scene where he gets politically embarrassed,
Yeah.
and his solution is to find some low man on the totem pole and beat him to death with
Yeah.
his
Murder
fists.
him. Yep. Yeah.
And that his solution to this is, I was just embarrassed in a situation where that I don't understand. What I do understand is breaking this guy's face with my hand.
Yeah. All three of the fear triad run away from things. Sixes run away from people and relationships. Sevens run away from circumstances and moments, right? Like if a seven's uncomfortable, they don't want to think about pain. They don't want to deal with it. They're going back to the party. Fives run away from things they don't understand and things that make them feel less than. And that's the character you're writing here. And I think part of locking into him is going to come to appreciate there is no right or wrong for a five. That's why he's
Mm.
hard for you because you're a one. There's no right or wrong. Everything's gray. It's about what can I be a master of and what can I um what makes me uncomfortable. And so
Interesting.
like it doesn't matter if what he masters is good or bad. It doesn't there's no morality to killing people. It's what he's good at. And so that's where he feels strongest. There's no for him, there's no morality in sparing life. It doesn't matter. It's dumb. Like he's good at this. Why does it matter if he's so? That's the five. That's what's going to be hard for you as a one is that sixes, fives and sixes especially. Everything's gray. There's no there's no right or wrong. For sixes, there's no right or wrong. There's just what the community wants. For fives, there's no right or wrong. There's just what I can master. And so it's that
Fascinating.
like, yeah. Anyway,
Enneagram
that's
is real fun. It's a real cool tool to write.
oh, it's great for writing. Yeah.
Because the thing is, not everybody neatly falls onto the Enneagram in terms of actual
No.
human relationships.
No.
But man, when you're writing a character, it
Oh,
is
it's great.
helpful to lock into
Well,
because
I
it gives
think
you a framework.
and it's based on I think part of what's hard using it in real life is that it's based on your flaws.
Yeah.
And that's tough to like dive it almost immediately forces you into a therapeutic reflection
Mhm.
sense. Whereas the Myers-Briggs and especially like Strengths Finder deal with your strengths and they're very uplifting and they're very like, hey, we can lean into this thing. Where Enneagram's like, here's what's wrong with you and here's where you're gonna have
Yeah,
problems.
it's like Jungian shadow work.
Yeah, but it's perfect for writing because character growth, we immediately need to know what's wrong with these characters. And so, like, you say, like, oh, this is characters in Enneagram 1. I'm like, oh, they struggle with right and wrong. They know what's right. They know what's wrong. They struggle to, like, forgive, mercy, and having understanding for people who disagree with them. There's no gray. But
That
you're
is
like,
my that's my two vehicles to a T.
yep, yeah, Enneagram 5, they master certain things, and then anything they can't master makes them incredibly uncomfortable. And
So
that's,
helpful.
yeah. So, like, with his love interest, part of what needs to make him incredibly uncomfortable with her is a fear about sex.
Yes.
He doesn't know how to physically relate to people. He doesn't know how to connect with
Well,
them.
and
So
that
when
is
she
actually
touches him, he's going to freak out.
yeah, and he's one of the things in his character that I've written is he's I don't know if you would call it asexual, but he does not have sexual relationships. He's not interested in sex. He's not
Mhm.
just, and
He's
that's
never he's
apparently
never
not
mastered it. He
uncommon.
doesn't understand it. He doesn't
Apparently,
get
that's
it.
not uncommon with narcissistic personality disorder.
Oh, really?
Um, is that's actually they're often narcissists tend to either have a lot of sex or no sex.
Hmm.
And so what was interesting is that I
Yeah.
mean that's exactly where I'm going with
Just to
that.
be clear, any number on the Enneagram can be a narcissist. Fives aren't narcissists.
True,
It just,
true.
it just, I just felt, I know you know that. I just felt the
Yeah,
need to say that out loud in
no,
case anybody's still listening to
but
this. Yeah.
it's very interesting that you mention he's going to be afraid of sex because that's exactly where I was going with that character.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's a lot of like the fives that I know in my life, who again, I love fives. The fives that I know in my life, they're called they're inquisitive. They
mhm.
really want to know. They really want to learn. They want to master things. But if there is something that they don't feel they'll ever master, it is dead to them. They have, and the way that I relate to it as a six is I was like, oh, it's like people for me. Like, and I really, as a six, to stay healthy, I have to fight against my urge to cross people off my list and be like, you're done. I'm done. So I really have to fight that urge. Fives, I think healthy fives have to learn to fight the urge of avoiding things that they're scared of. And so, yeah, with my son specifically, it was grades. He wasn't doing well in school. And you would think that he didn't even attend school. And so we
I
had to have conversations with him about
I'm,
like,
I'm a
hey,
professor and I see that a lot in
yeah,
students
we're like,
that
hey, this
that
isn't something you can run away from. It's something you need to master. You need to master how to be a good student because this is important. And he did. He was able to flip, and he is now. He's a great student, but he had to like see it as something to not be afraid of, but something that he had to like learn how to do. Yeah. All right, man. Let me turn off the recording and we can talk a little bit more.